Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Atkins, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of Organizational Advancement at Action for Children. And it is my honor to welcome you to our webinar this afternoon, where we will dive into the understanding of our latest Central Ohio Child Care Provider Survey report, The Crisis of Affordability. I will be serving as your MC today, along with my colleague, Marketing and Communications Manager, Christiana Szilard. Today, you'll be hearing from our authors, Dr. Joyce Chen and Dr. Catherine Glenn Applegate, along with Action for Children CEO, Tasha Booker. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. All attendees are muted and have cameras off. If you would like to submit a question, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen at any time during the program. Christiana will be monitoring the Q&A, and we will get to as many questions as we can. We do have pre-submitted questions, and those will be answered first. And some pre-submitted questions have been worked into our program. If we are not able to get to your question during the program, don't worry. We will send a list of those questions and answers along with the recording of the webinar to all of you by the end of this week. All right, so let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Catherine Glenn Applegate. Kat.
Thanks so much, Natalie. So first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about Action for Children. Action for Children is the local child care resource and referral agency for the Central Ohio area. And very briefly, that means that we have been designated by the state of Ohio to provide early learning supports to early child care professionals, to parents, and other primary caregivers to enable them to be the very best that they can be for their children that they serve. We do many more things than that. We'd love to tell you more. We'll share a link to our website later in the webinar. And primarily, we serve the Central Ohio area, which includes Franklin and the 6 surrounding counties that are shown there. Some of our programs are also available in Knox, Marion, and Morrow counties, but for the purposes of today, we're going to be focusing on just this primary area right here, which we call Service Delivery Area 9. Here are 4 things that I want all of you to take away from our conversation today. First, childcare is the workforce behind the workforce. That means that for employers to have employees, for employees to go to work, for parents to earn money for their families, all of those entities need childcare. Childcare is considered essential infrastructure, just the way that we need hospitals, we need roads, we need childcare to support our economy as a whole. Childcare is at risk in Central Ohio and really throughout the state and the country. We have a lot of challenges that make it hard to keep this industry alive and to keep it in a place where those families can really rely on it. We're going to talk more about that in a moment. We really need support from all of you, including business leaders, policymakers, advocates, others, whether you are a parent of a young child or not, to care about this issue and contribute to making it better. And with that, I'm going to pass the microphone to our excellent CEO, Tasha Booker.
Thank you, Kat. And thank you for joining us today. My name is Tasha Booker, and I have the privilege of serving as CEO for Action for Children. As we look at the broader child care landscape in which we're all operating today, I wish I could say the national picture around child care has stabilized, but that simply isn't true. Across the country, employers are scrambling to hire. Parents want to work, but they can't find or afford the care they need to do it. The workforce behind the workforce has been operating with low wages and thin margins, and now they face added uncertainty around their income and their future. That's the core of our employment crisis, and it's one we can no longer pretend is an isolated issue. We're also living through yet another federal shutdown extension. Every time Congress kicks the can, providers who rely on federal funding are left wondering how long they can hold on. Families and providers can't wait for someday solutions. At the same time, our country is dismantling its own Department of Education. That should alarm every one of us. Educators deserve fair wages to keep classrooms open today. Child care programs need resources to provide high-quality education today. And children deserve safe, nurturing spaces to learn and thrive today. Weakening support at the federal level puts even more strain on the very people holding this field together. Women and small business owners who show up every day against all odds for children and families. Here in Central Ohio, our population is projected to grow faster than almost anywhere in the Midwest. Growth is good, but only if the systems that support families grow with it. Our newest report makes this plain. Programs are still operating at just 77% of capacity because they can't hire enough staff. And nearly half report losing money each month. 16% do not know if they'll be open in 3 months. And even more than half are unsure about the next year without public support. This is not a small problem. This is not a family by family issue. This is infrastructure. When childcare breaks, the workforce breaks. When the workforce breaks, the economy breaks. But here's the part we can control. Investing in childcare works. Every dollar we put into affordability, stability, and fair compensation pays us back in workforce participation, school readiness, and immediate economic growth. As Dr. Katt mentioned previously, childcare is essential infrastructure, and treating it that way is how we get out of this crisis. Before we dig into the findings, I want to acknowledge the tremendous expertise behind this report. Dr. Joyce Chen and Dr. Catherine Glenn Applegate poured months of rigorous work into making sure this data reflects the real experiences of providers across our region. It's a privilege to have them walk us through this today. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank the many others who made this possible, including Action for Children staff, providers, our stakeholders, our community partners, reviewers, and so many more. With that, let's get into what the data is telling us, the numbers and stories that show exactly where we are and what it will take to move us forward. Dr. Chen.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Joyce Chen. I'm a professor of economics in the Department of Women's, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at The Ohio State University. And before I continue, I do want to mention that this report and the webinar that we're sharing with you today are reflective of my academic research with Action for Children and may not be representative of the opinions or perspectives of The Ohio State University. So a little bit of background on our data collection first. Our child care provider survey was distributed in August of this year to all of the providers in our service delivery area. We received 314 responses, 196 from child care centers and 118 from family child care providers, representing a 25.5% response rate. As you can see from the chart, the large majority of our respondents are from Franklin County, consistent with the composition of our service delivery area, as well as respondents from Licking, Madison, Pickaway, Union, Delaware, and Fairfield counties. Our sample size is representative of all child care providers in Central Ohio, with a margin of error of 5%. And so I'll start off with some high-level metrics that we monitor each year. I think we missed one on provider confidence. There we go. Thank you. So after improving gradually over the previous 4 years, this is the first time we've seen provider confidence start to show signs of weakness. So this is concerning, right? We had been seeing some improvement that is now slowly disappearing or starting to disappear. So we see that 53% of centers and 67% of family child care providers are concerned about long-term financial viability. That is, whether they'll be able to stay open in the next 12 months without additional support. In the short term, those percentages are smaller, right? 13% of centers and 21% of family child care providers. In terms of financial viability, we see that the proportion of programs reporting monthly losses declined slightly from last year, so that's a good sign. But still, any sector in which roughly half of businesses, so in this case, 47% of childcare providers, are operating on a monthly loss is going to be at risk. And as Tasha mentioned, when that sector is childcare, the workforce at large is threatened, as is the overall economy. Can we go back? There we go. Thank you. And then if we look at enrollment versus capacity, we see that our surveyed programs are still only enrolled at about 77% of their total capacity. This is up from 66% in 2024, but it does mean that childcare providers, by and large, do still have many open slots available, which places challenges on their financial sustainability. Now, if we extrapolate these numbers to all providers in Central Ohio, we project that at full capacity, over 20,000 additional children could be enrolled in care, expanding the child care system in Central Ohio by over $4.3 million every single week. We also see this pattern reflected in staffing. 63% of surveyed childcare centers say that they want to hire, with the majority of those already needing to rehire for at least one position in the past year. And then wages for childcare workers in Central Ohio top out around $23 an hour, compared to the average wage in Ohio across all sectors, which is about $33 an hour. And now if we turn to families, right, and the costs that they're looking at, we see that childcare costs range from 8 to 26% of median household income. But the U.S. government has established an affordability threshold for childcare at 7% being of total of median household income being affordable, right? And so all of our counties households are paying much more than that for childcare. And these childcare costs are drawn from the Ohio Department of Children and Youth's recently issued market rate analysis, which provides estimates of weekly market rates by percentile and provider type based on survey responses, rate sheets, and Ohio Child Licensing and Quality System portal data. And then our median household income here is drawn from the United States Census Bureau's American Community Survey. So we can also see that for families with young children, these childcare costs typically exceed monthly housing costs and is the single largest expense. And now I'd like to turn it over to my co-author, Dr. Glenn Applegate.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chen. So I'm going to get into some of the rate changes that we've seen recently and changes to PFCC and how those affect childcare providers. There have been a slew of these changes, and actually some of them are still in flux at this very moment. I'm only going to try to talk about 3 of them today. So some of these changes increase payments for childcare providers, but other changes decrease payments for childcare providers. That means that to really understand the differences, we have to look at all of those changes together to understand if it's a net gain or a net loss for providers. Those changes also impact different providers in different ways. So all this together makes it pretty complicated to understand and to navigate, but I'm going to do my very best to untangle some of that for you now. So first, before we get into deep, I'm going to share a quick background on publicly funded childcare. So publicly funded childcare, or PFCC, is monetary support from the Ohio Department of Children and Youth for the cost of childcare. The way this works is the state pays childcare programs directly on behalf of a child. For a family to qualify for PFCC, they must earn 142% of the federal poverty level or less, and have a qualifying activity that is typically school or work. We'll talk a little bit more about those qualifying activities in a moment. For a child care provider to provide that child care, they must have what's called an authorization agreement with the state of Ohio. The dollar amount that the child care provider receives for that child for PFCC depends on the 5 variables you see at the bottom of this slide. Now, among the many changes we've seen, there have been significant shifts to three of these variables impacting the amount that providers are paid. So those first three, provider step-up quality rating, provider type, and full-time, part-time, or hourly authorization are highlighted there on your screen. Each of these impact the child care provider's weekly income and so impacts the viability of that child care program to operate and to serve children and families. So now let's talk about that first one, step up to quality. So first, Ohio has a three-tiered quality rating system called Step Up to Quality. Programs can be rated bronze, silver, or gold. Most, but not all, providers who have a PFCC agreement with the state are required to participate in Step Up to Quality. Childcare programs who provide PFCC care and do not participate in Step Up to Quality receive the base rate, which you see there on the right. This is determined by the biannual market rate survey of licensed child care providers. Now, recently, to come into compliance with a federal mandate, Ohio had to increase its PFCC rates to at least the median cost of care. That increase went into effect just on November 2nd and is reflected in the base rate. Now, step up to quality rated providers receive a higher payment rate from the state for PFCC children. So programs that have earned a bronze rating receive an additional 10%, silver receive an additional 15%, and gold rated providers receive an additional 25%. Now, I've got a lot of numbers on this next slide, so brace yourself, but I'm going to tell you exactly what to look at here. So like I said, there's different rates for base, bronze, silver, and gold. But on these two charts, I'm only showing you the range here from base at the lowest to gold at the highest. If you look on the left side of this slide, you'll see under previous, the base rates that the state paid for PFCC care prior to November 2nd. Those base rates are in that bluish gray color. Next to that, you have the previous rates for programs who earned the gold rating. Then on the right side of your screen under new, you see the updated base rates in that same bluish gray and the new gold rates. So as I mentioned previously, the location of that provider impacts PFCC rates as well. So Ohio groups its 88 counties into one of three categories based on the cost of care from that same market rate survey. The amount that the state pays for publicly funded childcare depends on which of those three categories the program falls into. Now, the 7 central Ohio counties that Action for Children primarily serves are in Category 2, that's Licking, Madison, Pickaway in the top chart there, and Category 3, which includes Delaware, Fairfield, Franklin, and Union County on the bottom. Now, if you're listening and you have businesses, your constituents in other counties, or in a Category 1 county, make sure you check out our report so you can get the full citations and get that information too. Now, again, I know there's a lot here, so I want to narrow in now on 2 examples. So let's imagine a gold-rated, center-based provider in Licking County. That provider used to receive $250 per week for each toddler attending full-time. Now, that very same provider receives $275 per week for the same child. Likewise, a Type B family child care provider in Delaware County used to receive $175 per week for a preschooler, and now she receives $200 per week. So I just said Type B family child care, and I'm guessing that some of you know what that is, and some of you don't yet know what that is, which leads us into the second change to PFCC rates based on provider type. So there are 3 types of child care providers that we're talking about today. First, we have center-based programs. This is what a lot of folks think of when they think of child care. This is a location typically with multiple classrooms, with hours of operation, multiple employees. It may be a standalone facility, part of a multi-location network, or it could be housed in a place of worship or a school. There are just under 1,000 center-based providers here in Central Ohio. Next, we have family child care providers. These are child care programs that are operated out of an individual's own home. FCCs care for children in small groups, often spanning age bands, meaning that siblings can be cared for together and have the same caregiver often from infancy through school age. Family child care providers often can be flexible to accommodate parents with shifting and non-traditional work hours, which make these programs a critical part of the child care infrastructure from an economic perspective as well. Just like centers, in-home family child care is licensed by the state of Ohio. They are subject to inspections, they can be accredited, they can participate in Step Up to Quality and PFCC. So there are two types of family child care that we're going to lean into next. The first and more common type is called Type B. In Type B homes, a maximum of 7 children can be cared for at any one time, with no more than 3 of those children being under age 2. These are typically one-woman operations. She is the lead teacher, she's the assistant teacher, she's the administrator, the bookkeeper, she's the kitchen staff, she's the bus driver, she does it all. The second type of family child care provider is called Type A. Here too, Type A providers also have to keep a 1-to-7 ratio, but they can care for up to 14 children with additional staff. Now, I want to note here that until just recently, these ratios were 1-to-6 instead of 1-to-7. That's yet another of these many changes we've seen recently. Type B providers had a maximum of 6 children, and Type A until recently had a maximum of 12 children. Now those max capacities are 7 and 14. All right, so now we're going to go back to those numbers. So you see on the left here that previously those larger Type A family child care homes, those that can serve up to 14 children, received payment rates that aligned with centers. Now, effective as of the 2nd of last month, Type A's are receiving payments aligned to that Type B rate. So now we're going to zoom in and see how that reclassification impacts those Type A providers. Many Type A providers are actually seeing a decrease in their payment rates. So for example, let's imagine a Type A provider in Madison County who does not participate in Step Up to Quality. She used to receive about $222 per week for an infant attending full-time. Now that same provider receives $200 per week for that same child. Likewise, a gold-rated Type A provider in Franklin used to receive about $369 per full-time infant. Now she receives about $281, a difference of $87.50 per child per week. All right, so far we've talked about changes to the base and step up to quality rates. We've talked about changes based on program type. And the last change that we have time to talk about today is the amount of care a child is able to receive, or is eligible to receive, I should say. So earlier on, I mentioned that a family is authorized for a certain amount of childcare based on the primary caregiver's qualifying activities, which is typically work or school. The state will authorize a child for full-time, part-time, or hourly care. So for example, on the right there, you can see, let's imagine a bronze-rated center in Franklin County. They bring in $283.80 each week for each preschool-aged child it serves through PFCC, who is authorized for full-time care. And that's with the updated rates, I should say. Now, last month, the state redefined full-time, part-time, and hourly care. Before November 16th, full-time care was considered 25 hours per week or more. Now, that full-time rate you see in the top right is only given for 33 hours or more per week. Likewise, part-time care was 7 to 24 hours per week, and now that's 10 to 32 hours per week. So to bring this into context, imagine that you are that child care provider, that center-based provider in Franklin County in the upper right, and you're providing care for that preschooler. Let's say this preschooler has a single mom who works 30 hours a week as a nurse. This child was authorized at the full-time rate, but now that child is considered part-time, and you receive a lower rate. So nothing about that child's time at your program has changed. Nothing has changed about that parent's employment. Nothing's changed about your expenses as a provider. But suddenly you're receiving almost $100 less every week for providing the same care to that single child. So with that, we've talked about changes to base and step-up quality rates, changes based on program type, and changes to authorization rates, and the impact that they have on providers' bottom line. Now, I want to reiterate again that it's worth noting that there are other changes in flux as we speak, and you can dig in deeper to those in our report, but we're all going to be keeping an eye on what's going to happen next. To help with understanding all of these different changes, we have built a comparison calculator on our website where you can compare the previous rates to the new rates for a variety of circumstances. And Dr. Chen is going to share about that next.
Thanks very much. So we're super excited to share these tools on the Action for Children's website. The first is our revenue predictor or revenue projection tool. So these you'll see are rates as of November 2nd, 2025. These are the new rates in the tool. Previous rates were those in place before that. And so all you'll need to do is select from the drop downs here at the top the cost category that you're in, which is based on your county and your step up to quality level. And then you can enter your enrollment numbers for each age group, and you'll see both the previous rate, the new rate, your previous revenue, and your new revenue pop up in this calculator. And note that these are based on full-time enrollments. And then the change in revenue is in the final column here, highlighted in red for losses and green for gains once you click that calculate button. And we do have separate calculators available for Type B providers and for childcare centers as well. And then you can take that information also and bring it over into our budget forecasting tool. This is a much more involved tool, an Excel workbook that you can download that includes worksheets to work through tuition, where our tuition or our revenue projection calculator can help you look at enrollment, time space percentage for tax purposes, and then profit or loss. And I should note that this forecasting tool is primarily for family childcare providers. So this tool might help you see whether or not your business is viable, where there might be some areas for cost savings, and what other adjustments you might be able to make in light of these rate changes and other policy changes that my co-author discussed. And with that, I will turn it back over to Kat for some next steps.
Great, thank you. All right, so I'm going to try to keep this pretty simple and clear for all of you. And hopefully you can identify some ways here that you can take a part and be a part of the solution. So first, we're asking all of you to speak up, keep the conversation going. We've had some good success with this recently, from PBS NewsHour on national news to the Columbus Dispatch to the Columbus Chamber of Commerce. Childcare is a hot topic right now. And while a lot of this information is concerning, I am optimistic that this is an issue which, it impacts school readiness, our economy, our communities in every zip code. It's getting the attention that it deserves. And I hope that all of you will add your voice to the growing push for affordable, excellent early care and education. Second, we really need to fund holistic supports. Childcare providers of all types and all sizes need resources and supports. We need to invest in the people who shape children's daily experiences. We want to support worthy wages. We want to provide real resources and proven tools that help childcare providers thrive both as professionals and also as humans and as our neighbors, so that every child that they care for receives high quality, genuine care. Third, we need to help families to pay for care. Families want to be able to afford care. When we help families to pay for care, we strengthen not only those families and children, but also the child care programs that they attend and the entire workforce that counts on child care being available. We ask that you advocate for meaningful, sustained solutions to make childcare affordable so families can work and our communities can stay strong. So please support governmental policies and employer actions that lower costs to families, expand access, and enable all parents who want to be in the workforce to work with peace of mind that their children are well cared for and safe and thriving. Last, we want to empower early childhood education professionals. Here at Action for Children, we know it from the work we do every day, and their survey responses echo that too. They want to be part of the decision-making process. We hear that loud and clear. Keep childcare professionals at the center of every policy decision that affects them. Support clear communication and real resources, again, for their personal and professional well-being. We ask that our decision makers practice genuine inclusion so that the people doing the work can not only continue to do the work, but also thrive and deliver excellent life-changing care to the families they rely on, or families that rely on them, I should say. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Natalie.
All right, thank you so much, Kat. Well, the time has come. Now it's time for our question and answer session. As a reminder, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit your question. And pre-submitted questions will be answered first, and I know that we have a few of those. And if we're not able to get to your question today, we will send a list of those questions and answers along with this recording to all of you. So I know that we have a few questions to get to. So Christiana, what's our first question?
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Natalie. Our first question, I'm actually going to direct to Kat, and this question is asking, can a provider charge a family the difference between the state PFCC rate and what their rate is for families who don't receive PFCC?
That's a great question. The short answer to that is no. When a provider signs that authorization agreement with the state to provide publicly funded childcare, the provider is agreeing to accept that amount as payment in full and not charge the family further, even if that same childcare provider charges a different amount to their private pay families. One kind of nuanced exception to that can be if the family exceeds the hours of care that they are authorized for, then the program could charge the family, but only for the hours beyond that authorization only. And even then, it would really have to be part of the provider's policies written into their handbooks. So for example, if a child is authorized for hourly care, that's the less than 10 hours per week. And then on one week, that child attends for 12 hours, assuming it's written into that provider's policies, the provider could charge for those additional 2 hours of care. Otherwise, assuming that child stays within that authorization rate, that full-time, part-time, or hourly care as they're designated, the child care provider cannot charge the family above and beyond that, even if their care costs more, even if, to provide the quality that they want, they need to charge families more. They are not allowed to charge PFCC families more than that rate.
Kat, thank you for answering that. Our next pre-submitted question is, can you comment on the changes to state payment based on enrollment versus attendance? We touched on this a little bit. Kat, do you want to take that one as well?
Sure. Yeah, that's a really big one right now. I was honestly hoping that we could have a little more resolution on that before we released our report, but the truth is there's just new changes coming every day. So the question is about changes based to those PFCC payments based on enrollment rather than attendance. So for a little bit of context out there, historically, childcare providers in Ohio have always been paid for their PFCC children based on that child's attendance. So that means that the provider only gets paid when the child shows up. So the child can say, I can only have 12 children in this room and I'm holding this space for you. But if that child is out sick for the week, the provider doesn't get paid for that child for that whole week. Now, back in June, a law was signed that required the Department of Children and Youth to pay child care providers based on enrollment rather than attendance. So based on holding that spot, one of those 12 seats is dedicated to that child. The provider is paid for that even when the child is homesick. So that was great news. That is great news for childcare providers. This is the way most private pay families, those families who don't receive PFCC, that's the way they pay their childcare providers. They pay for that service, whether their child decides whether their child attends that day or not. So that law said that it had to go into effect, that payment based on enrollment had to go into effect in May of 2026 at the latest. However, I believe it was last Tuesday, the Ohio legislature sent another bill to Governor DeWine that was largely unrelated to childcare and non-controversial, except that it tacked on a provision that delayed paying on enrollment until July of 2028. And last I knew, which I believe would be yesterday, Governor DeWine had not yet signed that bill, but that is kind of on the cusp at this point. So when you think about those changes to those full-time, part-time, hourly authorization rates, that cut a lot of families from receiving that higher full-time rate, a lot of providers from receiving that higher full-time rate on behalf of those children to a significantly lower part-time rate. Programs are really kind of counting on being able to get payment based on enrollment rather than attendance. We're already seeing a lot of programs having to make the heartbreaking decision of telling families who used to receive that full-time rate and now are suddenly they're only getting reimbursed the part-time rate, having to disenroll those children because those providers recognize if they can't fill every space they have with children receiving that full-time rate, that they can't keep their doors open at all. So those children are being unenrolled. So providers are really feeling the pinch here, and being able to be paid based on enrollment rather than attendance was something a lot of providers were really holding on to, really looking forward to. And now that's become a big question mark too. Yeah, as soon as we're keeping an eye on to see what's going to happen and what Governor DeWine is going to do there.
Thank you for that added context. I know when we write our report, we try and get everything in, and things always change. So that's part of why we're here, is to keep a tab on those things and make sure that you're still updated and aware of what's happening. We have a couple of questions that are in the Q&A. I promise we will get to those. We are going to answer those pre-submitted questions first, but Kat, just an FYI, we have a couple that are asking about our federal poverty level and what support families receive, and then what grants are possibly available from the state to help with cost. So keep those in mind. We will come back to those questions. Joyce, we have a question for you, and that is, in writing this report, what surprised you the most in the findings this year?
I think one piece that we didn't get to chat about in the webinar, we alluded to it, is just the pay for childcare workers in Central Ohio. We know that that's topping out around $23 an hour. And so I compared that, and you'll see it in the report, to the survival budgets produced by the United Way. They produce these survival budgets for what they call ALICE households, asset limited income constrained employed households. So these tend to be the households that fall sort of off of the benefits cliff, right? They're not eligible for a lot of benefits from the government, but don't make enough still to make ends meet. And so based on those survival budgets, the minimum income needed for a family of four in Ohio with two children and childcare is $35.74 per hour, compared to our childcare providers maxing out at about $23 an hour. So technically, those pay rates for childcare providers are above the poverty level, which is about $16 an hour. But you can see they're far below survival budget levels, right? And even for a family with two adults and two school-age kids who do not require childcare, the estimated minimum survival budget would require $32.51 per hour. So you can just see this is an impossible bind for the entire industry, right? It's impossible to hire workers at competitive wages. Families can't pay more. And I'm just really feeling a lot of anxiety for the childcare industry based on these numbers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Joyce. Follow-up question to that, and I guess the flip side of it, is have you guys seen any examples of successful policies or programs that are helping both families and providers? And that can be either locally, nationally. Joyce, I'll let you start that and I'll open it up to the rest of our panelists as well.
Yeah, of course, I'm super excited to see how things go in New Mexico as they've just begun offering free childcare to all families in the state, regardless of income. And that comes with guarantees and funding to expand childcare facilities, construct new facilities, and actually raise wages for childcare providers up to a minimum of $18 per hour. So that sounds really exciting and promising.
Anyone else on our panel want to add to that?
I'll chime in briefly. Like I said at the start, one thing I think that is really motivating and exciting is that we have more folks that are participating in this conversation now, and more folks who are um, recognizing how this impacts. It's not just families with young children, it's really all of us. So it's really exciting to see business leaders and others getting involved in the conversation. We're starting to see more businesses recognizing childcare benefits as a valuable part of a comprehensive benefits package to provide to employees, just like health insurance, paid time off. Here's a childcare subsidy. So there's been some good movement in our country and in the state of Ohio on that, and I'm hopeful to see that grow.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. All right. For our last pre-submitted question by our attendees, what trends in this report worry you most if they continue unchecked over the next year? And I'm going to call on our CEO, Tasha, for this. We were talking a little bit prior to the webinar, and I know she has some really good thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. The data in the report was particularly alarming because we continuously see the trends going downward at a time where we know families are tasked with affordability issues. Inflation is incredibly high. We know that most of our families need additional income, and many of our families are making false choices. The other side of that, too, is just how unaffordable it is for our providers to provide childcare for our community at a time where we're already seeing across our 7-county region childcare deserts in big cities and in rural communities in Appalachia. And so I'm really concerned about the pipeline of those wanting to go into the childcare, early childhood education space, that it's going to be unaffordable for them to start a childcare center or even provide childcare, out of their home, leaving more and more vulnerable families without access to affordable childcare.
Awesome. I totally agree with that, Tasha. That's a really good summary of what's happening here. Anyone else on the panel want to chime in there? And if not, I'm going to go ahead and answer our submitted questions, which we'll be answering live. Our first one is, do we know if the state will offer any grants to help with cost? And I'm assuming that's either the cost of providing childcare or the cost of for families who are accessing childcare.
I can take that one. I wish I could give you 3 options right here and now, but unfortunately I can't. But there's nothing that we're aware of that's coming down the pipeline. That said, I would encourage folks who are listening, particularly for childcare providers, to make sure, one, you're signed up for the Action for Children newsletter. We always try to make sure we get that information out to folks that way. And 2, make sure you're signed up for the Department of Children and Youth Tuesday Times. They send an email out every Tuesday that's really chock full of relevant information. So I'd say make sure you're signed up for those 2 resources. Again, Tuesday Times is weekly. Our newsletter is monthly. That there's always good, meaningful information that you can put to use right then and there. So that's probably going to be your best source to make sure you're up to date on all of those opportunities.
Thank you, Kat. All right, our next question, and this is related to the federal poverty rate. I'll drop a link in the chat just for anyone who is not as familiar with that. We have a really good resource here. But this question is, if a family earns about 150% of the federal poverty rate, which is more than the 142% threshold, do they receive no support for childcare or do they get partial support?
I can take that one too. Um, That's a great question. So today, I was primarily talking about publicly funded childcare, but like the listener indicates, even 142%, if you make 143% of the federal poverty level, you're not comfortable. No one is secure at that place. If someone is 150%, 200% of the federal poverty level, these are still folks that are really struggling and working hard to get their needs met. So while publicly funded childcare isn't available for those who make more than 142% of the federal poverty level, there are some other resources. Ohio has the Child Care Choice Voucher Program. There's an early care and education grant that is available that extends beyond those. Families that live in Franklin County can possibly be eligible for a RISE grant that's offered through Action for Children, Future Ready 5, and the Franklin County Board of Commissioners. And there may be other local options as well. So, well, PFCC is strictly at that 142% of the FPL or less. There are some other options too, and we'll see if we can get some of those links dropped into the chat before we wrap up here. But if not, we'll make sure that they're in the information we share to follow up.
Absolutely. And I'll just put this out here as well. Action for Children, one of our roles as a child care resource and referral agency is to help connect families to care that they can afford. So if there are ever any families who are struggling with that, Action for Children is a wonderful place to call. You can give us a call at any time and reach our child care intake and referral team, which will help you find a program that fits your needs and your budget. So that's another resource that you can use at any time. Great. Our last question in the chat here. This actually, so we were talking a little bit about childcare workers and the wages that they get. We have somebody who just anecdotally has talked to a lot of people in childcare who are making between $12 and $14 an hour. And we're wondering about that $23 number. That is a little high. I think to people who are working in childcare, and they're wondering if that's an administrator wage or somebody else. But just where does that 23 fall in that range?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. That is administrators who are at the top end of that range at around $23. Looking at figure 6 in our report, you can see the range for newly hired and current highest pay for lead teachers and assistant teachers. So we see that assistant teachers are, again, more in that $14 an hour range. And lead teachers are maybe in the 18, $19 range per hour. And I also want to stress that because our data are largely drawn from Franklin County, our rates are probably much higher than we would see in counties outside of Franklin.
Thank you, Joyce, for that clarification. That's really important. All right. I think we have reached the end of our live questions. So thank you everyone for participating in the Q&A. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to to Natalie. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Christiane. I appreciate that. So thank you to all of you joining us today. And again, another thank you to our panelists. And again, if you weren't able to submit a question, you still have a few minutes to drop it in the Q&A, and we will get those answers over to you. And again, we'll have those answers and questions along with this recorded session in your inboxes by the end of this week. Also, we highly encourage you to visit our website. We have an awesome landing page that has all of these resources, including the amazing calculators that were mentioned in our presentation today. You can visit us on that link on the screen that you see, or you can visit us at actionforchildren.org/affordability. So in there you can read, download, and share our report, and as well as check out those new calculator tools. So from all of us here at Action for Children, have a wonderful rest of your day, and please continue to do good. Thank you.